John, I
What?
had a really kind of crazy experience this past week. I have been, um, just interviewing. Now, I'm interviewing for side gig type stuff. Bring in a little extra cash, a little extra fun. And had
A little extra fun?
yeah, well, a little HR fun, I guess. But,
Okay.
I
Wait,
guess,
wait, wait. Listeners, I want you to know you don't have to love HR because Chuck does.
yes, I love HR, so you don't have to. But, you
It's a
know,
great stuff.
it's 5-10 hours a week. I
Yeah,
found
yeah,
this
yeah.
gig, um, you know, uh, helping train AI. I'm like, really? And it's there's a couple of different companies out there that they look for professionals,
Yeah.
and they whether you are a nurse or you are a fireman or whether you are an accountant or whether you're even like a maintenance guy, right? And they're paying you good money, up to $100 an hour
Woo!
for 5 to 10 hours a week of your time. You can do it at any time, and you basically log in, and AI gives you situations, and then it tells you what it would do, and you say, okay, well, as an HR person, I like that. I don't like that. I would do this. I would do that. And
Wow.
so your job is to banter back and forth with the AI so that they can understand how HR people think, or how mechanics think, or how
Yeah.
nurses may think. And it's a fascinating, fascinating thing. And so I'm really excited that we're going to be talking about some AI stuff today, because I'm going to share my example of what I went through. But the other interesting thing is,
Yeah.
you talk about bias, and I don't know if we're going to get into that here, but you've often said, and I've just kind of poo pooed it a little bit, like, no, no, I don't think there's any bias. But who's training the AI? It's a guy like Chuck. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it
right.
could be a guy like John. And it could
Yeah.
be a guy like my brother in law, Bo.
Right. Yeah.
And Bo has a way different bias than I do on a number of things. So
Right.
it is crazy stuff. Crazy
Yeah, I mean, I
stuff.
think again, right, understanding those values and where those values are coming from, and understand we're going to get into that today because that really is at the heart of there. But before we begin today's episode, I want to be very clear about what this conversation and what it is, and what it's
Hmm.
not, because what we're talking about involves real companies, real people in a lawsuit that is actively moving through the courts. So nothing you hear today, ladies and gentlemen, is legal advice. Neither of us is speaking as an attorney or a regulator or as your HR consultant. We are coming at this as HR professionals and business leaders who spend our time inside real organizations wrestling with real decisions, trying to understand how well-intentioned systems sometimes produce what no one actually wanted.
And that distinction matters, because this episode isn't about predicting how a judge will rule or assigning blame before facts are fully settled. It's about understanding what this case reveals about the way AI is already being used in hiring, and what HR and business leaders should be thinking about right now. Regardless of how the litigation in the case we're about to discuss ends.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So I wanted to try something different. I was watching my feed, as I call it, my social feed, and I got this individual on there. Who knows why? Probably because of Chuck's story about aviation and the systems and checklist and all that kind of stuff. And so he was breaking down where there was an accident or a close to accident. He was going through the aviation. He was looking at that, and he was being very distinct. And so I really, when the more I sat with this case, it really reminded me how those aviation incidents are analyzed. Not in the movies, not in dramatics, but the real disciplined way pilots and investigators actually do it. They don't start with outrage. They don't start with the villain. They start by reconstructing the situation slowly, carefully, almost unemotionally, asking what conditions were present, what assumptions were made, and how a series of reasonable decisions quietly aligned in a way that produced risk.
Yeah, and the reason that approach works is because most failures, whether in aviation or healthcare or HR, rarely come from one reckless act. They come from ordinary decisions made under high pressure inside systems that were never fully maybe vetted out or examined once they were put into motion.
Yeah.
There you go.
So let's set the scene. Imagine a large employer that is hiring at scale, where applications are coming in by the thousands. Recruiters are overwhelmed. Hiring managers are frustrated by slow timelines. Leadership is demanding both speed and consistency at the same time. Into that environment comes an AI-driven hero hiring technology, marketed as a way to bring order to the chaos, reduce human bias, and help organizations make more objectable decisions faster than any individual ever could.
Yeah, so from an HR perspective, it's easy to see why that promise, lands. I mean, that is a high-end thing, and it's like, wow, this could be the godsend. HR, we've spent decades being asked to move faster, be fairer, reduce risk, and somehow do it all with fewer resources. So when a tool claims it can screen candidates consistently and objectively, it feels like progress rather than a gamble.
And from the business side, right? From the business side, the appeal is just as strong because AI feels like control. Control over volume, control over variability, control over exposure, in some cases, control over costs that leadership has been told over and over again are too high, Chuck. Your costs are too high.
So in addition to me applying for some of these AI interaction gigs, it was an AI that interviewed me. Yes, the one actually had a name, Zara, and a picture.
Oh, Zara.
Yeah, and I was talking and I was interacting, and as Zara would ask me a question and I would answer, if I didn't understand the question, I would say, I don't really understand it. Can you rephrase it? Zara would rephrase it. Zara would apologize if it didn't make sense. Zara then gave me feedback. If I answered well, that's a really good point, Chuck. Thank you for sharing that. And it was really something. And I was happy when I received positive feedback from Zara.
Yeah.
And if I was anxious, Zara would say something like, well, that's okay. Take your time. It was just really something how the interaction went back and forth. And so Zara, in this case, I don't know if a human reviewed my application, but Zara then at the end, a couple days later, rejected me. Yes, I got rejected by an AI. But there's an option for me to find out why.
Did you take that?
I did, and I should send that to you. But it was, hey, Chuck, you answered this question, but in this area, we didn't feel you were strong enough. I'm like, I do HR all the time, but that wasn't it. It was, it was a little different than interviewing with a real person because I could probably ask, okay, what are you trying to fully understand here? And Zara would not tell you that. But it was interesting, and I got all kind of great feedback.
Oh, that's interesting, right?
But it was, I'm sure, a cost-saving measure, and I'm sure that Zara, I'm almost positive Zara made the decision. I don't know if there was someone on the fail-safe at the back end, but I had the feeling it was Zara making the decision.
Yeah, well, probably what happened is Zara gave them a comprehensive, this is da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
Right? And this is why I would not hire him, blah, blah, blah. And then they looked at it and go, okay, that makes sense based on
I
his
think
answer.
that's what happened. Yeah. So let's talk about this autopilot thing.
Okay.
That being on autopilot, like maybe in these hiring processes, it's not absence. Okay. So I like this aviation analogy, and we're going to continue on that because we've used it in a lot of our other presentations, but it's useful because in aviation, in a cockpit, autopilot is not a replacement for the pilot, right? So think of it as it's a system that executes instructions based on inputs, either from the pilot or from like all the instruments that it is reading. It's based on assumptions and on constraints that pretty much someone's already decided, right? You know, and so it is just it is acting on those, right?
AI hiring systems work the same way.
Yes. Yes.
They don't independently decide what qualified means or what potential looks like. Of course, it sounds like they're being trained to do that. Which traits matter most? They learn from data, often historical data, that reflects how hiring decisions were made in the past under conditions that may or may not have been equitable to begin with.
Yeah, so which it means so if past hiring patterns favored certain educational paths, career timelines, physical abilities, or uninterrupted work histories, the system doesn't question those patterns. It absorbs them, normalizes them, and then it must apply them to some sort of scale.
Well, no. It applies them at scale. Like it applies them at hundreds and 1,000, where this one was one decision, right? And now it applies it to all those decisions that it's making.
Okay, yeah.
So this is where the story becomes unsettling. Because the allegations in this case isn't about a bad interview or a discriminatory comment made by a manager in the room. It's about candidates who never entered that room at all.
Okay. Yeah. And so the claim here is that applicants were screened out automatically before a human being ever reviewed their materials, which means there was no opportunity for conversation, clarification, contextual judgment, just a quiet final decision rendered by a system doing exactly what it was told. Now, John, I know we're going to get into AI here, but and it is not a accurate thing, but a lot of these recruiting systems before AI would look at a resume somehow,
Yeah.
and they would give you a green, yellow, or a red like bar, like they match.
Yeah.
I never even looked at that stuff. I mean, I would just to kind of see, okay, maybe if I got 1,000 resumes, but for the most part, they were never ever accurate, and that was before AI.
Yeah, they were searching for keywords, right? I mean, again,
Keywords,
same thing that
things like
AI
that,
is doing. AI is making the assumption that these are the things that we want. Based on what you're telling me, these are the things I'm looking for. Zara did that with you, right? She went through that and said, well, this is what they're looking for, Chuck, and you don't have the criteria. Well, if you asked me in another way, I could have given you a perfect example, but you didn't get that chance. And these quiet failures are often the most dangerous kind because there's no obvious moment when someone says, this doesn't feel right. Especially when the system is working efficiently and producing results that look clean on a dashboard.
So one bias manager can do real harm, but the scope is usually, we hope, right? The scope is usually limited. A bias system, on the other hand, doesn't just repeat a pattern, it amplifies it. And applying that same logic thousands of times without fatigue, doubt, or that self-reflection.
Yeah, and that's where scale changes the moral path. Because every small distortion, when repeated over and over again, becomes structural barriers that are invisible unless someone is intentionally measuring outcomes rather than intentions.
So that's why so many of these cases aren't discovered through internal confidence, but through external pressure, litigation, regulatory review, because no one inside the organization is actually looking for patterns they didn't expect to see.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? They're just not noticing it, right? And again, right, this comes up time and time again. We've seen thousands of lawsuits about there where somebody puts a policy in place and they're like, oh, it's a good policy. And then somebody goes, this seems like it's really discriminating against a protected class. And so then they do the investigation, the EEOC, or somebody comes in and does the investigation. They're like, yo, this policy is doing that. I think we may see this in AI. So there's the question, right? That keeps circling back to me as I read about this case. And it's deceptively simple. Chuck, who is actually flying the plane? Was it the vendor that designed the tool, the employer who deployed it, the HR team that trusted it, or the algorithm itself, which was executing its instructions perfectly?
Yeah, I guess that question matters deeply from an HR and legal standpoint, because while you can outsource tools and technology, you can't outsource that accountability. So for employment decisions, even those decisions are mediated by software.
Yeah, right? Yeah, I mean, so basically what you're saying, I think, let me make sure I get this, is that as a HR, as a business, you're still responsible for what the software does.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? And so you're doing that. And so that's why I think this case matters now. What makes this case particularly important is not just the allegations, but the timing. Because AI hiring tools are no longer experimental pilots or fringe products. They're embedded in core HR infrastructure across organizations of every size.
Yeah, and HR leaders are being encouraged and sometimes pressured to adopt these tools quickly, even faster than government's frameworks are put in place, audit process or shared understandings can keep up.
Right, so basically these things are happening and we're like, okay, this is a great tool. We don't even know what it's going to do. We don't know if it's going to be biased. We don't know how it's, but somebody is up there. You need to do this. We can't have 20 more people scanning 1,000 resumes to find one great person. We're going to use AI, right? And so let's talk about some takeaways that we can do, right? So if you're listening as an HR leader or a business owner, the first thing I would take from this story is that AI is a tool, not a decision maker. And the moment recommendations start being treated as final outcomes rather than inputs, the system is already being misused.
Yeah, I wonder, I would think that Zarok did give human review, not so much as a courtesy or a backup plan, but human review is the control surface that keeps the system aligned with both legal and ethical expectations.
Yeah, and bias does not disappear when humans step back. And right, we talk about this like, oh, humans are biased and they come with their own perspective and they're looking at it from this lens and we're getting in there and we're doing all those things. What happens with AI, it scales it, which means speed without oversight does not create fairness and it just accelerates whenever patterns already exist.
Sure. I got a third point, I guess, would be trusting a vendor is not the same thing as monitoring the outcomes for yourself, right? So if you don't know who's advancing, who's being screened out, and whether a protected groups are disproportionately affected, you are, well, I guess you would be flying blind.
Yeah, and I think what I would do is if I was using AI, I would go in and I would look and I would just take samples. I would do a lot of sampling around who's being brought in and does that make, I want to go through those resumes that were rejected. I just want to sample it for one position. And if I come in, I'm like, well, why would these people be rejected? And if I notice, oh, you know what they all have in common? They live in this neighborhood or they're over 40 or whatever, then I'm going to go back and go, okay, we need to go recalculate this, recalibrate that on there. The other thing that I would look at, Chuck, is the responsibility has to be explicit. Because there's no one clear, if no one clearly owns the system, the outcomes, the authority to intervene, risk doesn't vanish. It just spreads quietly underneath your organization.
Yeah, so this case really isn't about artificial intelligence at all. A lot of times it boils down to that leadership, right? Judgment, whether organizations are willing to stay human in a way they design and govern their systems. Doesn't mean don't use systems, but you still have to stay involved.
I love that. Yeah, that's a great line. In aviation, every incident, no matter how small, is studied not to assign blame, but to make the next flight safer. And that mindset is exactly what HR needs to be doing now, right? Is this not working? Let's do a sample. Hey, what's happening? Oh, let's do back. We need to go in there and figure that out.
Yeah, AI isn't going away. It's going to be here. It's increasing. I know even the company I work for is exploring an AI tool, okay? But responsibility isn't either. And I will let you know, as a happy ending with my interaction with Azara, she did it did invite me to reapply again. So there we go.
Interesting. Technology does not eliminate accountability, Mr. Chuck. It clarifies it.
So thanks, folks, for listening to our back and forth today. A little bit about AI, a little bit about my personal experience dealing with an AI recruiter, and ultimately, thank you for listening to the HR Stories podcast, where there's a lesson in every story. See you next week.